Hey everyone, Tankenstein here. In this video, I'll be reviewing the BMP-2MD, but we'll be mostly referring to it as the 2MD throughout this review. This is a currently 8.7 BR rank 6 squadron light tank in the Swedish Ground Forces tech tree. The BMP-2MD currently costs 400,000 squadron RP, or up to 7,200 golden eagles if you decide to purchase it in that way. With that said, in this video, I'll be going over everything that you need to know about this light tank, including its stats, how it plays. I'll go over its strengths and weaknesses, I'll give it some scores in several key areas, and then I'll give it my final recommendation on if I feel that this vehicle is worth purchasing or not, or even if you want, grinding for it via Squadron RP. With that said, if you like this kind of video, please consider subscribing to my channel, but without further ado, let's get into the review. Now to start, I'll place the stat card here on the side of the screen. Important things to note are its armor thickness, its power to weight ratio, and its armament. Now for how it plays. In short, the BMP-2MD is a scout and a flanker, nothing else. While it can of course cap bases, this is more incidental if anything. The 2MD unfortunately only features a somewhat weak 30mm 2A42 autocannon without anything else to supplement it. This means that you will only have up to 82mm of armor pen at most with your APDS belt, while similar BR tracked light tanks oftentimes feature ATGMs of some kind. Due to this fairly low penning armament, you need to always be purposeful where you shoot and know your enemy's weak spots. Stray shots will get you killed quickly. You also need to be somewhat creative in how you move around the map, as flanking is the only surefire way to destroy an enemy. If you hear an enemy coming towards you head on, you either have to hide and shut off your engine and hope they pass by, exposing their weak side armor, or you have to run away and figure out a way to creatively flank them. Aside from this, scouting is something that the 2MD is fantastic at, as it has fairly good mobility and Gen 3 thermals, which will help to show any enemy that comes on screen so long as of course you're looking through your sights. While scouting is typically not a great way to solely earn score, it will help with spawning into a CAS aircraft and will be a great supplement towards your typical assists and kills that you'll get via flanking. Better yet, being that the 2MD has such a low profile, you can oftentimes sit behind a hill and scout with either your binoculars or commander's sight, all while staying relatively protected. In short though, while the BMP-2MD is limited fairly severely by its armament and weak armor, you can easily carve out a niche in scouting and flanking the enemy team, while also supporting and base capping incidentally. It isn't anything special, but the 2MD does what it sets out to do with some success. Now with all that said, let's go over its strengths and weaknesses, and first for its strengths. The 2MD has a fully stabilized cannon. Second, it has a commander sight. Third, this vehicle has Gen 3 thermals for both the gunner and commander. For its fourth strength, it has very good mobility with a 65 km/h top speed and over a 20 to 1 horsepower per ton power to weight ratio. Fifth, the 2MD features a low profile design which will make it more difficult to see and hit. For its sixth strength, this vehicle is amphibious, but using this feature will likely get you killed. Seventh, the 2MD has a fairly high 550 round per minute rate of fire. And finally, the power pack in the front of this vehicle will sometimes stop weaker shells from fully penning. And now for its weaknesses. This vehicle lacks a laser rangefinder, which light tanks normally start receiving by this BR. Second, max armor pen comes via an APDS belt with only 82mm of armor pen at most. For its third weakness, this vehicle has a terrible cannon depression of just -4 degrees. Fourth, it lacks an ATGM, which you can find on pretty much every other BMP in game. For its fifth weakness, it has awful armor that can be penned by anything from an HMG through of course fully sized cannon shells. For its sixth weakness, it has poor zoom on the gunner and commander's optics with just 6 and 5 times zoom respectively. Seventh, it can only carry one bill of the 250 APDS shells. And finally, not that it's expected at this BR, but as it lacks a secondary weapon, you would hope for an IRST auto tracking system, which the 2MD unfortunately also lacks. Now with that said, let's get into how I score this vehicle, and first for armament, I give it a 3.5 out of 10. Though it isn't good, at least the 30mm cannon has a high rate of fire. Aside from that, however, it lacks many of the common things that a light tank around this BR has, including a laser rangefinder and a secondary weapon, such as a missile and high zoom optics, at least if it doesn't have a full-size cannon. Still, the 2MD at least has Gen 3 thermals, which are incredibly useful. Even if you do have to manually adjust your rangefinders, the shells drop off in velocity and armor pen pretty substantially at range. Regardless, if flanking, the 2MD will typically get the job done, and I've had a good amount of fun with it while doing so, but it just isn't universally a good weapon system, especially at this BR. A laser rangefinder would go a long way with this vehicle. Now for mobility, I give it a 6.25 out of 10. While the BMP-2MD is not slow, it's just decent for a light tank at this BR. It has just over a 20 to 1 horsepower per ton power to weight ratio, which is nice, but it isn't going to blow anyone away. It even has a very good top speed of 65 85 kilometers per hour, which is of course very good at this BR. Though it isn't outright amazing, the mobility is still very good and should allow you to perform flanking, base capping, and supporting with ease. Simply put, the mobility is good enough to do what it needs to do, which is really all that you can ask for in a light tank. Now for survivability, I give it a 2.25 out of 10. While not the absolute worst, the survivability on this vehicle is still really bad. It can't survive an HMG from the side or an autocannon from pretty much anywhere, and especially not a full-size tank shell. While it features 6 smoke grenades, you'll find yourself wanting more of them, as they go very quickly. 6 is just not a lot at any BR. ESS helps too, but between the poor armor, cramped turret, and interior laden with both fuel and ammo, the BMP-2MD really doesn't have much survivability at all. Now overall, I give it a 4.25 out of 10. I'm rating this slightly higher than the exact average of all my scores, because I still perform decently well with it, which speaks to some intangibles that I can't properly quantify in the scoring system that I have set up for these reviews. Regardless, if flanking, the armament is totally acceptable, but while the mobility is good, it isn't really anything to write home about. Because of this, while the BMP-2MD is better than I expected it would be, and is certainly more fun as well, it still feels like its BR is just a touch too high at 8.7. Don't get me wrong, it can be okay, but it isn't really all too good. On the other hand, would decreasing its BR really make it any better, especially considering the way that it plays? Possibly not, and even if it does, it's probably not going to be much better if it sees a BR decrease. Simply put though, this is a niche vehicle, one that both scouts and flanks, and does both things fairly well. Beyond that though, you really can't expect much. That's not too much of a bad thing, it just points to the fact that this is a lightly armed vehicle in higher tiers. Now with that said, do I recommend the purchase or the grinding for the BMP-2MD? No, I do not. Quite honestly, the cannon is mediocre at this BR, and with barely enough mobility to allow somewhat consistent flanks and with no laser rangefinder, the 2MD can be a bit of a chore to use. There are many situations and several tanks where you have almost no chance or ability to defeat them, which I understand can happen with autocannon carrying tanks, but it seems to be an inordinate amount for a tank at this BR. The total reliance on just a below middling 30mm autocannon is rough to deal with, and won't allow for many kills if you're unlucky enough to encounter an MPT from the front. So no, I do not recommend this vehicle for purchase via Golden Eagles, nor do I recommend it as a priority to research with Squadron RP. If you want a much better vehicle that fills a very similar role, I would advise to research the CTWV RCV before you even take a look at the BMP-2MD. Also, I do not give the 2MD my Tankenstein seal of approval, as you could probably imagine. If nothing else, I genuinely did better with the BMP-2MD than I expected that I would, and it's just slightly better than I thought it would be. But it's still mediocre at best when compared to almost all vehicles that it will encounter. Maybe if it saw a BR decrease to 8.3 BR or even lower, then it might be somewhat decent. But for now, it just kind of feels like a waste of time to unlock. Not a terrible vehicle, but really not good at all. Now with that said, thank you all so much for watching. If you don't mind, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. Also comment with what you think of my review on the BMP-2MD down below, and of course what you think of the BMP-2MD itself. I'm interested to see your opinions. Either way, thanks again, I'll see you all on the other side. Take care everyone.